basically we have changed the way business model looks like in the industry that we're coming into. That's one of the core fundamentals. We help consumers basically consume as little energy as possible, and therefore also our driver or our incitament to sell electricity should not be on the side to sell more. So we're actually trying to sell less. We also have a subscription model that basically you pay a small monthly fee instead to cover our costs. But that doesn't scale for us as a business model in total. We have also invented something we call power-ups, which is integratable products and things that we actually sell to consumers. And the good part with that is that we basically found a business model that is on the right incitament for the customer. So by basically selling smart equipment to consumers, that equipment can be used in order to consume less electricity, optimize your energy usage, and hence basically we make money on the good stuff. And quite opposite to the energy industry in general. So basically my background is energy industry. I worked with that for my whole career almost. Worked for the big energy companies. I worked with the tech side on the energy industry, and basically the foundation for Tibber came in that. It was sort of bought out of frustration from my point. An industry that is super slow, from a consumer, low engagement product. You don't love your energy company. It's something that you must have and you just live with, right? So with that sort of starting point, that was our engagement, like we need to change this, and that was the spark to Tibber.
Excellent. And I think one thing that you're tapping into here, which is extremely relevant for this audience and for the conversation and topic per se, is that you have a very complex situation in terms of what the product actually is here. Because, I mean, you buy and sell electricity, and on that you have innovations. You have the consumer-facing side of the company, which is like the main driver of bringing customers, which is both a software product, the app per se, and then you have the hardware part of it as well, which is both consumer-facing in terms of that's who's going to buy them, but you also have the power-ups that have partnerships or even non-partnerships, but you have integrations towards them in it. So you have so many facets of your product in this element, which I think is, I mean, obviously it was the charm of that which made it interesting enough for us to go into it. But it also, if you look at the Tibber app at a glance, it could somewhat look as a very simple product, but it's a heap of complexity to it as well, which is very interesting, and hopefully we'll drive down a bit in what that actually means from your perspective. But if we can start out with that, what would you say? What was the initial product? What was the packaging of the initial product Tibber?
So the funny thing with that is that I opened up my old slide deck from 2016 when we actually started the company. I actually looked at the stuff in the stage where I pitched to you, Mikael, the company, and it was this. I mean, it's not that big difference, because fundamentally, one thing that I knew at that side, because I've been in the industry so long, is first off that prices are important. So if we can't be relevant on the price point, or basically become disruptive in price points, we have no business to be done here. That's going to be a fundamental thing that we need to crack anyway. If we're not fully relevant on these base points, that's not going to, I mean, even though we make a fancy app and a cool thing, right? We need to beat the prices of the competitors. Otherwise, we're not going to be sort of in the eye-catching for that. But I also knew from the other side is like energy on general, what you do is you sell green energy at a cheap price. That's what the whole industry does. And people are sort of bored out of it. So that's not a product itself either. So we knew that we need to innovate in the trading in order just to become sort of let into the table to play. But beyond that, we had to create also a product that actually would engage consumers. And I I would say on the drawing table, I didn't know the power of power-ups, the integrations and the control possibilities and what we opened up. I didn't know how big that was going to be, and how important in the story that would develop. But we had it all along. It started off with one device. It started off with one thing, or actually two things that we did. Today it's 30, and we basically spend a lot of our R&D development into continue developing this path. And that's also what consumers are sought after. When will this happen? How will I do this, etc.? So I would say that the generic design of the product on the base structure was set pretty early. Maybe we were lucky. Maybe we were very insightful at the time when we did it. Maybe we had a long industry background, which meant that we could see these things coming. But I think we laid the groundwork very early on. But then the big work was then, how do you actually build this fairly big platform, make it happen? Because I remember also our early talks when you were pressing us, like, when are the changes in the onboarding happening, and how come we haven't released this and that? But the thing is, like, we were building a beast, and that took time, and we couldn't be iterative on all sides. We had to make a lot of groundwork for the first 2 years that today we can harvest on. But at that time, it was very little consumer facing and shitload of business application building.
Yeah, and it's a fortune to be able to have witnessed this process, and I completely agree with you that there's very few companies we've been into, and we've been into 40 companies over the course of 4.5 years, so we've seen quite a lot. But there's very few companies who has been so clear on such a complex product portfolio as you have been, from the very start to the very end. And then as you say, obviously market changes has done that, things has gone up or down in priorities or from a marketing perspective as the power ups. The Tesla thing was early on, but then developing in it to where it is today. But that thing is really interesting. And something that I always come back to when I look at companies. It's extremely important to have that foundation of your core product and stick to that and execute the hell out of that. And then you're obviously going to have opportunities alongside the way that you can't foresee in what aspect they will actually matter going forward. But just having that route set out for you. Kan du ta det någon annanstans eller? But also one thing, then, you coming from the energy side of things, obviously from perhaps the more forward leaning parts of the dinosaurs, but how was it to step into the pure tech world? How did you look upon this project now to create these sets of products, both from a competence perspective of yourself and the team that you were assembling, and how to do that? How was the transformation from your industry to a tech facing industry?
Well, I worked for the big energy companies for many years, but also my history is also tech. I ran the thing was that one of my previous employers that I worked for many years was IT consultancy firm that basically delivered most of the IT systems to these companies, and I was the product person there. And I had a development team, almost 300 people at that time. So I was used to running big tech organization and doing this run. But the big difference was that when you got into this seat, when you basically had a handful of developers that we handpicked, basically, was that we didn't need any agile processes, product owners, scrum teams, whatever. It was just a few guys in a room, and we coded the shit out of it. And the good part from many aspects is that I think why we also clearly could see the product early on was that we were part of the target group. I haven't built this product for you, Mickey. I built it for me. The fun part is that you also enjoy it. And from that sense, the compass how to build stuff becomes very simple. Do I want this or do I don't want this? Do I have an issue with this? Is this interesting enough? And if that answer in my gut says no, then we don't do it. So basically, when we were sitting with the tech team and building this, we didn't have sort of big backlogs. We didn't have all of these things like how we wanted to do it early on. We do today, but we don't. At that time, we didn't have it. And we were just going at it. It's like, yeah, but I want this to work. And okay, now I got it up. Now I bought this stuff at home and I started connecting. It's like, yeah, but it doesn't really work the thing I wanted. And we iterated like this continuously. So running the tech side of it, sort of, we recruited very skilled senior architects in the beginning. We had 3, and then me and Ed, that was basically product people from the perspective. And then we were just sort of using the product every day and making the coding like go and iterative in that way. And that was our process in the beginning, just to build the stuff that I wanted at home, that I also knew that a lot of people else would need, but I couldn't bet on it, but that was my gut feeling.
Yeah. And also on that, I mean, I can remember I always got impressed by the people you hired. It was always it at least felt that every person you hired pushed you quite a lot as well, and had such a knowledge that was overlapping and also greater than yours in all those areas that you needed to add. And you guys were never scared of hiring people who were better than you in those respective areas. And it was, when looking at your team, it was extremely obvious. And I think that was a huge success factor, that you could both do it deeper and broader at that pace.
No, but definitely. I mean, recruitment is, just looking back on it and also where I sit today, recruitment is sort of the most critical thing. The thing that I regret the most today is basically we haven't spent enough time in recruitment. I was sitting with a couple of guys from Revolut, and we were discussing sort of what does it, how come you can scale to like 1,000 people that quickly and still keep sort of the level of engagement on the skill level on the people. And basically, they have invested so much more than we have done in recruitment, and I suffer from that today. We did it handpicked because in the beginning I thought that sort of, let's recruit the top guys and that I knew around me, and then we basically recruit in their circles. So we basically hire people that they knew, because then I know that they were approved by other people, and then we will only get smart people. But after a while, that circle dies because you can't do that endlessly. And then the search started, and then it became immensely more important, more complex. So basically, something I would urge everyone is to, as soon as you need to start scaling, start to actually sort of building also recruitment organization, especially if you see that you have a traction and a product market fit, that you will say, okay, we're going to get investments now, be ahead of the curve and sort of build that up. That's going to pay long term. But I guess that's not the first function you do, and especially not when you need to, when you don't have the cash now to start scaling. But as soon as you see that you need to do it, then just invest a lot into that, because it's really hard to find super talents, especially when you're kind of an unknown. It's becoming better when your brand is bigger and you have an impact, and you sort of, there's a buzz in the market and you're attracting a lot of money and people start using your product. Then people is paying attention to you. But before that, sort of, you need to convince other people start joining you. And if that's not friends of friends, then that circle is really hard to find a top talent.
Yeah. And also on the back of scaling, I think this is a very relevant topic in terms of who's listening in, since most of our companies is early stage. I remember when we had this growth session in the old office when we were still sharing the office, where you had a model which we together then also took a couple of steps on, that more or less has become the blueprint at Wellstreet in how to scale your customer base. Obviously, It's 100% fitting when it comes to consumers, not always 100% fitting when it comes to B2B, but still the ideological piece of it is still relevant for it. But where you had this inner circle of consumers, I refer to them as nerds, and it's nerds in respective areas of what you do. They have a almost unhealthy interest in the industry or the products that you are to be delivering, and then how to go outside that circle and create circle on circle on circle going forward. And that workshop and the result of that was crucial for both of us in different aspects, but also interesting to see. I mean, that's a go-to-market and a marketing perspective of it, but it's obviously tied to the product as well and the product marketing functionality. In terms of these growth steps that you have taken, how much has that impacted on features for the product and the narrative of the product in order to reach a broader and broader market as you go along?
So, I mean, I'm not a marketing person. I worked B2B, so software before, and that was my history, and then also very tightly integrated into the energy industry. So I knew very little about growth hacking. I know very little about Facebook marketing. I know almost nothing about referral programs and how this should work. So it was an extremely steep learning curve in the beginning. I remember the early days, basically me and Ed, my co-founder, we basically sat and did all the Facebook marketing the first year ourselves, writing copy, trying different content. I tried to read up on sort of growth hacking, joined the forums on Facebook to trying to figure out what are people doing, can we hire this person, is this something you have in a consultant, how do you do it, etc. After sort of doing a lot of stupid experiments and trying a lot what other people has been doing, my conclusion was basically I need to understand my target group in full. I need to understand it fundamentally so I can understand how I can reach them, and also understand how they perceive my product and how that will grow. I mean, that's easier said than done. But I can give you an example how we did it in our sense. It's like Tibber is, since it's an energy contract, doing Facebook marketing on an energy contract, that doesn't work from the perspective that people don't want to buy an electricity contract, right? You're not interested in that. Any marketing spend that will look like that will basically be a very high cost to serve. High cost to acquisition, and it will also basically drive the wrong type of consumers in. So I spent tremendous amount of hours just to sort of figuring out why doesn't our message work. I tried this image, I tried this text, we try another thing, and like it doesn't work. I remember also we had a scale discussion with you guys, and we're like, yeah, we're spending in this amount of money, but we're getting this amount of customers out. So I mean, I'm not sure really if we can just pull like more venture cap into this and the product will actually start scaling really. That was sort of main concern I had when we came to that conclusion. But then we backed off and sort of started to think like, how would growth actually work? And the growth that was happening, but not through digital acquisition, was happening through organic channels. I tried to figure that out. So we started looking into it, and we saw that sort of some Facebook groups were actually attracting a lot of our customers in. So we went to those Facebook groups and saw that people are sharing they were sharing screenshots and debating sort of that this was good or bad, and people basically caught on to it. And we realized that the referral part of the product, since it's a trust-based business, if Micke, you tell your friend how good this is, and you show the app and you explain the story, the likelihood of that to actually make you do the effort to switch an energy company is so much bigger than any commercial that is in. I mean, that's probably for any business, but also taking consideration that we are in trust industry. I mean, you know that you can be cheated in any place if you sign up something bad. You have the comfort level that you have in order to switch is kind of high, and the engagement to this is kind of low. So you need someone to actually tell you the story that picks that up. So a lot of our growth hacking has been in the product when it's connected to how to get other people to basically refer other people into this. How do we get the initial tribe, if it's 100, 1,000 or 10,000 people that are super engaged, super sort of into this, how do we get them to be our advocate into the industry? And that led out to our referral program, which is then tightly connected into the product. And I guess that was also my answer. How would we grow from a product perspective? Because I didn't know digital marketing. I'm not a wizard in that. Actually, I would have loved to found the company with one more person that would have been like a CMO or a bright sort of digital marketing. But it's also a blessing from one perspective, because in the same way as we skipped earning money on kilowatt hour selling that to consumers, we had to find another way of making money. By not being able to be successful on Facebook marketing on Instagram, we had to develop another way to grow. And that insight gave us sort of the kick. Today, this is still the model, and it's working really, really well.
I think that is super interesting, and it as I said, is a modus operandi that we actually enforce the vast majority of our companies to work on, because it works, but it also gives you the hard insights on an outside-in perspective of your product, your offering, and the market itself. Because I mean, I've been in that seat myself many times. It's so incredibly easy to get stuck on an inside-out perspective of how incrementally fantastic your product is. But sitting on the outside, you just like, I mean, what's the difference? And I mean, we had a couple of companies shooting up in Stockholm around the same time as you guys, where from a consumer perspective, it looks completely the same. This is what they do. Boom. I mean, you can't read 20 rows and find out the difference. You don't have that time, right? In order to acquire customers. So I think it's a very good model. I would also like to ask you, since you're doing hardware now as well.
Yes.
And I would start out with challenging. Would you see the hardware products as standalone products or acquirers for your core business?
They are both on some aspect. Some of our products actually hangs on Clas Ohlson today and can be bought in store solutions there, which basically is sort of an acquisition channel for us, because people bring them home, they need to download our app, and yeah, they basically get exposed to what it is, and then they also get into the concept. So it's sort of it drives consumers to us, but it's also standalone works. I mean, we have profit on it. We have been able to build products so it works. But there's a pretty interesting thing here is that since we have a subscription model that is not linked to the hardware products, since it's a standalone, that's a learning. Like if you bundle a hardware product with a subscription, that's a really hard sell. But if you have a subscription that is working out of itself, people are willing to do it, and then you add hardware products to that, that's a pretty good model, because you don't need to have the same margins on the hardware side as a traditional hardware company, and you're not carrying the same risks because we have a continuous improvement and continuous revenue. And to that as well is that when you get a hardware product in that is basically tightly integrated into the concept, the subscription lifetime increases as well. So I would say we have found a pretty interesting model where you can combine subscription and hardware, but it's not connected. And that's a major insight, like selling a hardware with a subscription, that is a no-go, I would say. I wouldn't even try it out today, because we have done it so many times. I sort of it tells me that sort of that doesn't work. But having they isolated together and make both of the sides work, that's golden for us.
No, I like that perspective, and I also think that irrespectively if it's hardware or not, you can clearly see that these these evil subscription models are now doing more harm than use to companies, where you want to lure people into a subscription that you should be unaware of, or you need to do it in order to get whatever else. It just simply doesn't work in the world that we're facing right now. I think that it's an interesting part. So I just have two themes left before we let the audience ask the questions. But I mean, we need to touch upon Founders Fund, obviously. Besides that just being an historical investment, not only for you and us, but also for Sweden and the Nordic region, amazing and all. But what I think is the most interesting part of it is that I think they invested in you because you are one of the world's greatest product companies, not because you have an amazing go-to-market strategy or marketing efforts or whatever. And judging that partly because of knowing you, but also partly looking at the team they shipped over in order to do the pre-investment discussions and the DDs and all of that. It was a very product-focused process. Do you agree on that? What was your learnings from that, and why in the end did you? Because I've been on the other side of the table, I know that you can't be bought for money. I've tried, so what was the reason why you actually had them joining you going forward in terms of the vision, and do you see them as they were investing in a fantastic product company rather than anything else?
Well, they had done their homework, of course. They didn't stumble upon a Swedish Norwegian company up here in the north without a clue. They had screened the energy industry. They understood that that's a major industry under change. They were looking for sort of what's going on in different aspects. And from that perspective, we're trying to identify sort of can we bet on something that we truly believe in? I think product perspective, yes. I mean, they drilled us hard. I mean, one thing to be said is like these DD processes are now been through a couple, and there's almost nothing as intense in that. Maybe delivering a major bid to a contract somewhere. I mean, you sit up day and night to write and sort of deliver pricing and stuff. But this is reverse. They like keep asking you questions, and they are tireless. And every time you basically open something up, they discover something new, and then that becomes a whole new trail. For example, they want to look at how customers come in. Do they become a free subscription first? Okay, where do they take the next step? And then they ask multiple questions, and then they find an area, and they say, but this doesn't make right. This number should be 60 and not 40%. Because all the portfolio companies we have been looking at, this number is actually off. Okay, so why is it off? And then they start drilling in your product to trying to figure out, have you done something wrong? Or they basically find a number that this is higher than we used to. Why do you have so high conversion rate on this? Or why is this? So they really like go through everything you have in the books. But it was a super good experience as well, because they basically vet the whole thing you've done. And the conclusions you can draw out of it is like, okay, yes, referral rates are too low. So why isn't it too big? And then after they're done with investments, they bring in a team and basically tell us like, okay, let's work on referrals. How would that go? Okay, these companies, they have done a landing page that looks like this. And the SMS or the text message or the thing, it should have a better image because it should attract this message, etc. to try and experiment. So they were very product focused when they came in, because they understand that is a fundamental thing. And like that's also what we're going to transfer to other markets, because this was an expansion play as well. We started off in Sweden and Norway. We launched this summer in Germany. And just to move that product to a new market, we knew that we need to also have a good product that could adapt. So from many aspects, yes, they poked us in that. But they also did a tremendous good job on sort of vetting us and actually looking into what we've created. And they had great insights to it.
Yeah. I was impressed by their approach to it, and I think it's an experience that I wish more companies are to experience going forward, even though they are cumbersome in the middle of it. Irrespectively of how it ends, you always walk away with something that could be useful for you going forward. But you pulled it off, so that's amazing. I just have a final one, saying that if you look at Tibber, the core business of that is buying and selling electricity. On a general level, company total, how much time in percentage do you spend on buying and selling electricity, and how much do you spend on the rest of the product?
Yeah, that's kind of interesting. I haven't thought about it, but I would say like 5% of the company goes into trading energy, like 95% into anything else. But there is a big thing here. Is like we had a revenue last year of like above 500 million Swedish crowns, and we're only 60 people. Anything goes wrong in that cash flow, that's devastating. So we spend a lot of time in sort of cash flow and optimizing that, if that's connected to trading. But also bank relationships are enormously important. We have now credit line that are fairly big, so that also takes a lot of effort. So fixing these fundamental things in the company in order to make it survive and everything, that takes a lot of time. But actual trading and what you would done in a normal energy company, it's very little effort into it compared to anyone else.
Yeah, and I think that is, I mean, that's what I'm after in terms of the guiding principle of what is it actually that you need to pull off in order to scale a product company of this decade. I think that's truly interesting. I think the floor has understood that you are extremely open and savvy to it. So let's see if there are any questions. There is probably some moderation of that, or is that me, Jess?
So no one's put any questions in the chat, so I think you're welcome to moderate them. I think anyone who wants to ask a question, please unmute yourselves and ask your question. If a lot of you are mute at the same time, then just put a note in the chat and I'll moderate it. But it feels like we'll be able to manage it, sort of on the go. You just need one person to take the first dive.
Can I do it?
Please go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Mikael and Daniel. It was really interesting, actually, the entire chat. So I have a list of questions. Probably I'll take it one by one. A few for Mikael and then a few for Daniel as well. So I think the first question is for Daniel. Because understanding your product, as far as I can see, there are a lot of partnerships that are involved. So acquiring the B2C customers and then acquiring the B2B customers, and then the product line, the hardware, all the partnerships. So was it? How are you doing it? Because usually it is easy to acquire one customer if you're focusing on B2B. But when so many partnerships are involved, then what was your strategy? Focusing on whether you acquire B2B first or whether you acquire B2C first.
And B2B referring to the partnerships, right?
Yeah.
Well, I think that the partnership run was kind of easy. First off, we started off with partnerships where we actually could sell something. Basically meaning like there was sort of a hardware company that produces a thermostat or something specific. And of course, they are interested in selling more. And they're interested in exciting channels. So basically, we closed a few deals early on. My co-founder is an awesome deal maker. That's his super skill. He's able to go into a negotiating meeting and suddenly there is a contract on the table. I don't know how we do it. That's his super skill, and usually that has been the breach in many of these things. He has been the one that sort of come in the discussions, and we sort of ended up in that. My end has been sort of I've spotted what we need, and I have sort of identified how we should solve it, and sort of laid the ground for that. And he has been the one that is running in the market, sort of hunting these things. So that's been a very good cooperation. Also thinking about the founder team is like how do you find the right balance between the founders? Because you can't be three people that do exactly the same thing. Then stuff won't happen, because you will focus on exactly the same things. So from that perspective, I would say partnerships was easy in the beginning. It was harder later on. I mean, beginning, it's when you needed we take in these fairly unknown companies that had hardware that we wanted to sell. So we started off with that pitch that we want to bring revenue to you. So how can we do that? And it's not a very invasive thing for you. We'll fix all the integration and around it. And these teams that we approached, they said yes, and that was the building blocks for it. Of course, then after a while, you start negotiating with other bigger companies because you need them in the ecosystem. But when you build traction and when you actually have customers coming in, it becomes so much easier. Today, the discussion with the partner is very simple. Like they reach out to us in many aspects and say, how do I get into this power uplifts? Because our consumers are demanding it. So what do we need to do? Do we need to build something, or how should we ship it? So it's also shifting from when you get product market fit and traction, you also go from being a seller to a buyer, and that's an extremely good situation come to partnerships. So that twisted after a while. But I would say that we focused on the easy partnership in the beginning and focused on getting consumers in, because consumers and traction is the key thing, because you need to get that in and get traction, and then you can actually close bigger deals.
Yes, I understand. Wonderful. Next question is probably for Mikael. As an investor, or as a VC as well, sorry, as a VC as well, how do you see an early stage company when, for something to work, you need to acquire so many partnerships? Because acquiring one customer, it is easy to see as an investor. But when there are so many partnerships involved for a company to be successful as an investor, how do you judge that?
I think I shouldn't answer this from a VC perspective, because we are set a bit different than VCs in general. We are much stupider than what they are, so we need to understand everything on a granular level, which Daniel has had to experience. We are full of dumb questions because we need to see the float. And for us, if we together with the company can't see or name the 80% needed in order to reach a platform of profitability or sustainability, so that you can take a new decision on what to invest in order to go higher or broader, then it's not for us. So I mean, we do our judgment calls on founder teams that has a very, very sober approach to reaching revenue. They're very clear on what their target audience actually is. So from a B2B perspective, and I mean, my background is B2B sales from my Klarna days. It's like, if you're gonna hit X amount of revenue on a B2B sales company within a year, you should be able to name 80% of those customers. Otherwise, you're shooting blind. I mean, it's simple. It's no models, it's no VC, it's no nothing. It's just common sense.
Yeah. Yes, and then back to you, Daniel. So I can see that you're actually facing a lot of recruitment problems when you're expanding. So could you name a few, let's say, recruitment platforms that you're using right now, and what kind of recruitment strategy that you're following when you're expanding?
So what I did in the past was, as we said, we on the early stage, we made sure we hired people that we knew, and we hired people that they knew in order to get top level people. And when that bulk ended up, we started to do advertising, like probably that you all you do, like LinkedIn and whatever. Wasn't super successful. So basically, I took help from a consultancy firm because I knew very little about recruitment. So I basically I hired in a consultancy firm that's going to do basically hunting for us and finding candidates. That's going to work on our basis. I work pretty closely to these girls that came in because I would like to understand, because if a tech recruiting company has worked for like 5 years or something and are good at it, they will probably bring in best practices that I can learn in half an hour. If I look at what they are doing, I've learned like 80% of probably what sort of how this is done. Then the last 20% is the skill that needs to come into how will we recruit in Tibber, because we need to do things differently. If we do what everyone else is doing, we're probably going to be a lame duck, because then we are on the same platforms with the same message, with the same stuff. So we need to figure out the rest. So basically, we had a company coming in, doing recruitment for a month or two. They're pretty successful, actually. They reached out to a lot of people through LinkedIn. I guess you are all target for that. So you get this recruitment sometime as like, hey, are you interested in this and that? And that's actually, that in itself wasn't sort of super successful. But then we started to tailor it up and sort of really write stuff specifically for that. So if you're looking for a person that was recruiting for mobile development, let's say for Android app, we need more Android developer. Well, what's important for them? So, for example, we have about 3,000 reviews on Google Play, and we have 4.9 out of 5 in score. So I would think, like, if you would be a developer on Android and would like to work with something, maybe you won't like to work with something that is super appreciated and good. So we started to sort of tailor that into these aspects, like showing, hey, do you want to work for a new exciting startup tech company that is sort of booming, and we have 4.9 in score, etc. But we're looking for lead Android developer, and I saw your profile, etc. And suddenly the message shifted, and people started to respond and like, yeah, that sounds interesting. So then, for my sake, I kind of understood that we need people that would work inside building our message and content, and then start poking at people through it. And that's what I'm building right now. So we hired the first person that is taking lead on the recruitment, and we're sort of building the team now going forward. But I think always, like, there are best practices, learn those, figure out what it is, but then find your edge to it. Because if you don't find an edge, you're just going to be sort of like anyone else.
Yes. Mikael, this is the last question for you. As let's say, as an investor, how do you trust a company when, let's say, the money comes in after a few years, let's say a couple of years? So, and then the first initial phase would be like partnerships, but then there's not going to be a huge amount of revenue coming in. But then after that, it's going to be, let's say, huge revenue. Mm-hmm. So how do you, let's say, make that judgment?
I mean, I think, again, answering it from our perspective, we never engage in business opportunities where the people doesn't share the same values as we do. We are not opportunistic in the sense that a business opportunity can rule out anything else. So I think the companies we engage with and the founder teams, we trust from day one, but also being such an early stage investor as we are, we're sharing blood, sweat, and tears, and some laughters every now and then together with them over the first 2 years. So we know each other inside out. I mean, Daniel knows the best and the worst of me, and I'm the same with him. Now he doesn't have any worst though, but you know, it's an incremental process when you're so early stage. So that is never a question. If that question arises alongside, you either clean that air so it never has to be cleaned again, or you go separate ways.
Yes, I understand. Really good. I think this is probably the last question for all of the startups there. When you're really, really short of money, then how do you invest so much into, let's say, hiring a recruitment company, which is impossible to do? If you're really good, and then if you're in a position to hire a recruitment company, yes. But when you're such an early stage, then how do you sort out your recruitment problems?
I mean, if you are totally drained on money and you need to hire people, I guess that equation doesn't really go through, right? I mean, if you can find people that can work without a salary, I mean, wonderful. But then I guess you need to pay them a lot of equity in sense to do that. If you're short on money, you can't get a recruitment firm. I think you should. I mean, Google is your friend. Figure out how stuff works, right, and try doing it yourself. I mean, that's what any founder do. I mean, so many professions I've done in the last 4 years. I'm sort of. It's amazing because basically you need to move from being a professional recruiter to being sort of a support person, to being a digital marketeer, to being a finance person, accounting, and everything. I mean, you move in these aspects, and I mean it's a really tough thing of being a founder, right? You all know it. You're directly faced with your business in any aspect. In big corporations, you would have 100 people doing all these things, but yours are all alone. You need to respond for all of these things. The same goes for the recruitment. If you can't have money to basically do this, then you need to figure it out yourself. And if recruitment is your main business priority, because that's constrained, then that needs to occupy 80% of your day. Because if that's sort of your big hurdle to get forward, just figure it out. And if you can't figure it out, so then, I mean, play on your personal relationship. I guess you know someone that knows someone, and then start calling them and asking, like, how does this work? How do I do it? So I would say sort of all of these business challenges you are in front of, I think that sort of separates people as well. Some like accepts that, okay, we can't do this, and then they stop and sort of put their shoulders down and suddenly like, yeah, okay, we didn't make it. Or you just step in, because you can always beat these challenges. But then if no one around you can basically crack it, it's your responsibility to fix it. That's the blessing and the curse of being a founder, is like there's no one else. There's no one else that you can go to, so you need to fix it eventually yourself.
Yes. Thank you, Mikael and Daniel. That's it. I'm done with all my questions.
Thank you. Who's next?
I'll ask a question, if I may, about scaling into new markets. So you just entered Germany recently. Congratulations. How much time and effort from a product perspective do you put into making yourself ready for more markets, and kind of what are your thoughts and your strategy from a product perspective on that side of your business?
Depends, I would say, on business to business. If you think that you're going to be a national or a closed sort of product for a region or a customer group, I mean, in the beginning, I guess you don't spend too much money or time on sort of thinking about these questions. I know from start that we would be an international platform, and my co-founder, he's not actually even based in the same place as me, he's sitting in Norway. So we started off the company in 2 places. So we were forced from the start to build cross-market. So like handle currency changes, handle sort of different rule sets for different markets, different language support. We were forced to that from the beginning. Pretty good lesson, actually, because then you need to take these questions that might be much harder to deal with later along the line. But also a very boring thing if you don't need to use it in the beginning, that you actually spend time on it, because then I would judge that from case to case. My specific product is very centered around compliance, because we need to acquire like an energy license. It's not sort of it's sort of a bank license, but not as heavy. But we need to cope with a lot of regulations, so we knew we need to scale this to market. But we put a lot of ideas how that should be done, because I knew it from the start that scaling this, we wouldn't. A successful Tibber would not be a company that would be leader in Sweden and Norway. A successful company from our perspective would be at least the European sort of taker of that market. Hopefully we can be the world's largest digital energy company, but at least from a European perspective. So I knew that the 3rd or 4th or 5th country will come, and it's better to be prepared for that early on. So we mapped out and like in product wise, we mapped out what is generic and what is specific for markets, and we try to build it tech wise. So it's like components, what is, for example, if we need to acquire a customer in Germany, we have a regulatory process sending data to different market participants. This is sort of isolated. We haven't built that in together with the other functionality. We have that as a separate module that we built for the other market. So when going into a new market, we basically need to build a new of those modules. But the currency exchanges and the billing platform and the user sort of handling, that is still sort of supporting multiple verticals of it. So we were forced to think about it early. I would say it's a major thing to take on if you build a product for 4 years and then started to go to another market. That's actually, historically, I've worked with such technical products, and that almost easier to start from scratch sometimes, or at least there's a big effort to sort of build this in. So it would be good to think about it early on.
Thanks. Interesting. It's going to be interesting to follow them, new markets you're entering, and what's next.
Thanks.
I think we have time for one more question. Anyone? Okay, then perhaps I can ask you, Daniel, for, I guess, three wise words or 3 wise statements that you will recommend to sort of the slightly earlier stage founders. Perhaps you can save them a few months of pain or some headaches by sort of, what would you recommend, for example, the 3 things they should focus on, say, when they come into the office every day, when they get up, every day and they have a million things to think about, what would be the 3 things that they should think about to refocus their minds?
Focus. That's the main thing. Keep focus long term, so you understand what you need to build and what you need to do to achieve it. Focus midterm, so you make sure that you place a few bets along that you think that will fly, and focus in order to make those big ones. And focus short term. It's like, be super focused on what needs to be solved today. If there are too many things on your agenda, you probably will be very scattered and execution will be low. So have only a few things that you need to do right here, right now, and like clean everything out in the rest, because just executing these few blockers that are on the line will basically help it. So I think, like, from my perspective, it's been like having the long-term vision and the focus for that is extremely important for us as a company, because if we hit the road bump, we still know that this is the long-term run. Focus midterm in order to get cash and these things, and make sure that you have that aligned. But on an everyday basis, I spend so much time in just trying to figure out a few blocks that we're trying to solve. It's like finding that specific thing that you want to fix right now, and don't try to fix everything, but fix a few things. And when you fix those few things, move along.
Really great. Thank you very much. Okay, we need to jump into our next session now. So can everyone join me in saying a huge thank you for Daniel and Mikael for joining us. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Silent clap to you all. Thank you so much, Daniel. Looking forward to seeing you soon, and I'll see the rest of you in a minute or so, hopefully, in our advanced user research. So if you dial it out of this one and then back into the video call that's linked to the other calendar invite, then I'll see you there. Bye, everyone.